Hey all, this is Brett in post, and I just have a couple quick housekeeping items that I want to get out of the way before we start the episode. First off is that Seth and I went really long with this one, and so I'm going to split it up into 2 episodes. The first episode, which is the one you're listening to right now, is going to be all about our first impressions and our thoughts about the DLC. And the second episode is going to be all about lore and the story. We kind of pick apart certain theories and talk about things that are presented in the DLC. And it was a fantastic discussion. It just went really long. So I figured the best way to do this is going to be releasing it in 2 episodes. So there's that. And then we didn't really put a proper spoiler warning at the beginning of the episode. So I just want to really quickly say that there is going to be spoilers for the Elden Ring DLC and main game. We're going to talk about literally everything at a certain point. So if you haven't played the DLC, if you haven't played Elden Ring, then maybe this one isn't for you. I would really recommend you play it. But I want to get that out of the way. There's going to be full spoilers for both the base game and the DLC. And last but not least, we are doing our first merch drop very shortly here. This is something that I've had a few people ask about, and so I figured I would deliver on that. All the details are going to be on my social media. So if you head over to my Instagram, you'll be able to see everything there. That includes prices, designs, and everything. It's worth noting that because this is my first drop and I don't have an online store, I'm going to be doing everything to demand. And that means that I'm going to order a bunch of transfers. I'm going to do everything myself, but I'm only going to order shirt sizes for what's ordered. So every time something's ordered, I'll go out, get more, and I'll ship them out in batches, or I'll get them to people in batches. So if you order something, it might take a couple of days for me to get it ready and to you, but it'll get ready and to you. I think this is just the best way for me, so I don't have to set up an online store. That way I can do everything myself. The quality control is all in my hands. It'll take a little bit longer. It's a little bit more legwork for myself, but I think it's a better service to everyone. So if you want merch, there's going to be 3 different designs, and I'm really happy about them. I'm really excited about them. I'm excited to get them to you. So all of the information is going to be on my Instagram. And if you want anything, send me an email at lordtodeath@gmail.com or message me on Instagram. We'll get there. This is my first time doing this. Please be patient with me, but I'm very, very excited about this. I just wanted to get that in before the episode started. And without further ado, we have Seth from Overthinking Games. Really excited about this episode. I hope everyone enjoys. Thanks. Yeah, it's awesome. I never really understood RuneScape.
That's fair. This all tracks.
And that sounds, I don't know, that seems like a good enough place to start, honestly. And if it's not, then, we'll edit it out and we'll just pretend that never happened. So, how do I introduce my own podcast? This is my name's Brett. This is Lord to Death. And I'm here with super special guest, Funtime Boy.
Funtime
Boy. my big cheese.
Hi, my name's Seth. I'm from Overthinking Games.
Fantastic. So we wanted to just get together for a brief moment in time, because we were both finished the Elden Ring DLC, and we wanted to just take time to just talk about the Elden Ring DLC, the story, our trials and tribulations, our questions, anything, really. But before we start that, so there's 2 things. First off, if you just want to, you've introduced your podcast, I guess, but if you want to plug it now, you can do that.
Yeah. Totally. All right. So, hi again, everybody. My name's Seth. I'm 1/3 of Overthinking Games, a podcast about what games can teach us. We run what I think is a really interesting niche in the gaming podcast space. We are not a zeitgeisty kind of podcast whatsoever. We're not like gaming news related. We're really focused on taking a look at games and thinking about what can we learn from them? Both like what can we learn about ourselves by playing those games? What can we learn about games by playing them, and like game design and what makes for good games, what makes for good sound design, what makes for good art design. And then also what we can learn about like others and their experiences by playing some of those games that they developed. So we like deep diving those, and we're really just like 3 really good friends now, chatting, having a great time, and exploring new topics every week. We've got plenty of fun stuff between, like I said, talking about art direction to talking about like existential horror to like side conversations. I went to a convention and I was like live on scene. So got plenty of stuff for everybody, and it's a fantastic time.
And it is, and I know I've plugged it several times on this podcast. Whenever I, feel a lull, I'm just like, hey, you should go and listen to these guys. They're cool people. I was on an episode last year, or was it this year? The last year has like entirely just blended into one. I think it was like late last year. And
sounds about right.
It was, super good time. Wonderful podcast. We were just saying this before, or I was just saying this before we started. It's like one of the only ones that I like tune into every week, because despite hosting a podcast, I don't listen to a ton of podcasts. I'm a pretty terrible podcaster. But yeah, fantastic podcast. Would definitely recommend it. And I think that's the best description that I've heard of your podcast. That was very that almost sounded like scripted. It was almost too good.
Well, yeah, I did think about it a little bit ahead of time, because I was like, I know he's going to ask, so I got to think about a little bit about what I say. Also, when I was at that convention and I had to talk to 100 people and be like, here's what my podcast
true.
is.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
And a little bit of that was also my teacher voice, for the record.
Oh, yeah.
For the greater audience. I'm a teacher during my regular life, which is not right now because it's the middle of the summer. But so that was a little bit of my teacher voice in there too. I think it's why it sounds a little more official.
Fair enough. And the second thing that I want to try to ask any guest that comes on the show, it's a very vague question, but I think it's a very good question. I think it's fun. And it's just kind of what's your favorite way to interact with lore in a game? Or rather, what's your favorite way that lore is presented to you in... It doesn't have to be games. Right now, we're talking about games, and I mostly talk about video games. So that's kind of, where my head is at. But it's what's your favorite way that lore is presented to you or to interact with lore?
So I'm definitely a fan of the environmental storytelling feeling, which we're going to talk about Elden Ring and stuff, so that's definitely going to come up. But I do always enjoy getting to an area in a game and then being able to look at that and be like, oh, so there's a story we're trying to tell here without any sort of words, and just sort of with vibe and aesthetic and design, and say what are these people trying to tell me from looking at that? But then also on the opposite side of that, I don't hate a good exposition. Sometimes you just need to be here's the characters, here's what's happening, start your story.
Yeah. And that's for me, it's the perfect game for both of those is The Last of Us, and The Last of Us 2, if you care about The Last of Us 2. I do. I know a lot of people hate it, but because it is fantastic environmental storytelling, but then you also have there are tons of cutscenes where it's just we're just going to exposition the shit out of you. It's we are just going to shove the story down your throat and make sure you are on the same page as we are. But yeah, there's a ton of stuff in the environment, and I love games like that. I think I also prefer a little mix of both, which I think is just good storytelling. But obviously, like you said, we're talking about Elden Ring and, the Dark Souls series. Bloodborne is maybe one of my favorite games ever. So I like a good implied story because it leaves you a lot of room for your own imagination. But I'm also down just to be, told what the game is about, where I don't have to think.
Yeah, it feels a little bit of genre dependent. I will say the one way that I don't like lore presented is I don't like I don't know what best to call it, but the data slate method, where it's
the Bethesda method.
Yeah,
where it's Fallout, where it's oh, you have to go and look in computers for the lore and find all that, or
oh, I'm gonna have to read a letter. What was the game? Was it Returnal that did it, where there's just
oh yeah, I think so.
You kind of just have to read little lore fragments as you go through, and I'm it's cool, but it's a little too disjointed. Especially for a game where the lore kind of matters. It was weird. I remember Doom Eternal also did that, but I only sort of care about the lore of Doom Eternal. That's not really why I'm playing that game.
I was going to say, I played Doom Eternal because I want to go to hell and shoot things. I didn't know that there was a story when I played Doom 2016, because, you play the originals and it's how much story actually is there? It's, so
I appreciate the effort they put in for it.
Yeah. And honestly, the lore they created was pretty cool. And like the story they managed to tell was actually super compelling, but it's not a game that I look to find out anything interesting. I'm just like, nah, I just want to shoot things. Like, what do I care?
You're like,
and I think I'm kind of in the same boat as you. And like, that's why I have a love-hate relationship with like Bethesda games, especially Skyrim, because opening a book to try to read like the history of the Nords is really just terrible to me, because it's like, okay, I'm going to stop, on my quest. I'm going to stop all my missions. I'm going to stop everything to take 5 minutes to read this book. And
read a book.
It's just, it's cool because it's a good way to like make the environment feel like fleshed out and real, because if you don't know something, you can go to a library and read a book on like, the history of whatever. And, it's kind of that same, but I don't always want to do it in the game. It's not really my cup of tea. It's
very funny imagining a Skyrim character being like, oh, sick, a library. Like, come on, man.
I'm going to take a break from slaying trolls just to go to Winterhold and read a bunch of books, which I guess is kind of like, the entire point of Winterhold. But
I mean, there's regardless something to be said about it. But
yeah, regardless. So no easy segue into this topic, I guess. But I guess we're just going to start talking about Elden Ring. And I feel so I want to focus mostly on the DLC, because obviously that's what we just played and that's what's most fresh on the mind. And I figure the best way to do that is just to start with like first impressions and kind of talk about our experiences with the DLC and kind of how it differed from the main game, or things that we learned from the DLC that influenced the main game, and then talk about kind of pros and cons. I have my own gripes about the DLC and the way that it kind of presented things and
certainly
interacted or did not interact with the main story at all. Yeah, so I just wanted to, I guess we'll just start off, like, what are your first impressions? Like, obviously, I'm sure that you loved it.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the common sentiment for the FromSoft DLCs is the DLCs are always like the best parts of the game. Artorias of the Abyss is amazing. Old Hunters is amazing.
Yep.
Ring City's amazing. So high hopes coming in, plus obviously base game Elden Ring, fantastic. So high hopes going in. I remember coming out of that first little cave they start you in, reminded me a little bit of like Ashes of Ariandel, how you start that. You come out of this cave, and one of the things I was immediately impressed by is the landscape. And I think you made a note about this in our notes as well. I thought it's so crazy to have this like massive open field, which felt very FromSoft in its design, just to be like, we're putting you in this big space, work with it. It's something that's like very Elden Ring-esque, but also something that's very different than what they've done before. It felt like Elden Ring and like previous Souls games, there's a lot of like caves and being indoors. And so for them to just give you like a big open field,
with no clear direction to go. And like that was the big thing that I noticed was it's like, well, actually, it's funny you mentioned it feels like coming out of like the Ashes of Ariandel DLC, because that just kind of sparked the memory in my head of Majula from Dark Souls 2, where like you come out of like the deep dank cave from the intro of Dark Souls 2. I don't want to talk about Dark Souls 2 very much because that I have a very love-hate relationship with that game, but Majula is genuinely my favorite like
I love
hub
Majula.
area. Majula is my favorite hub area. It's so cool. And the way that you just come out of the cave and it's just like this beautiful, like lush little like landscape. It's just like, it's this cute little so homey place. It makes me feel so nice. And I had a kind of
so good.
Right. And I had a similar feeling coming into Shadow of the Erdtree, except I felt kind of the opposite. I didn't feel homey. I didn't feel comforted. I felt scared. I felt disjointed, because you look out and there's just this like crazy, like crooked tree in the background with like, it looks like cloths coming down over it. Like it's, everything's dark. It's very oppressive. Like it doesn't give very good feel good vibes. And then it just like puts you out in the middle of nowhere and you're just kind of let loose, which is almost like, it's almost daunting.
It is. And it's, this sort of like dusk that's around. Can you see the first like big wicker basket dude when you first come out?
I think he's hidden a bit behind that first fort.
Yeah.
Like the Fortress of Solitude, is that? Or whatever. The first fort there, I think, because because he's right past there. I don't know if you can see him right off the gate. You might be able to. I don't remember exactly.
then the second thing that happens, right, you move forward like 10 feet and then the dual like disc dude jumps off the thing and just starts messing you up.
So I'll say this. So I think the biggest thing that they did was they added a way to scale the DLC to characters that were like already late game, because by the time you start the DLC, you're assumedly in late game. You're assumedly like, you know, a very high level. At least
like 150.
I was exactly 150 going into the DLC. Because somewhat like my buddy's like, yeah, you should be fine. He was level like 190 going into the DLC. We had a very different experience, but they added a new way, which is getting the Shadow Tree fragments, which is, it's spelled Scadu, which I was immediately, I remembered that was like an old English way of saying like shadow or shaded. So I think the way that you're supposed to pronounce it is Shadu, but I honestly don't know. Scadu. But they added these fragments that give you just like a flat buff that increase your characters. I think it's like your health, your attack, and your defense, but only within the DLC. I don't know exactly what it does.
I think it's just attack and defense.
Okay, just attack and defense. Oh, that makes sense, I guess, because health would go in kind of with defense.
There's some like weird way that it works. Not every blessing level gives you the same bonus.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think it's like technically the first one is like a 7% bonus or like an 8%. Like it gives you like that first one gives you like a pretty good jump, and then it's like a smaller percent all the way up to like the 19th one, and then like the 20th one is like a slightly larger one.
Okay.
From what I remember, people were saying that by the time you get to max blessing level, you're dealing like 70% more damage and you're taking 70% less damage.
Okay, so that makes a lot more sense. And I don't know if I died a lot coming into the DLC. Like, so when I first went, I walked forward, I saw the dude with the discs. I died to him one time. I died in like barely more than one shot. And I was like, yeah, if that's a base enemy, then I am not prepared for whatever is happening. I'm going to go somewhere else. And I ended up at the Black Jail Knight. Like the first little, like, I guess like the first mini boss that you can encounter, I think. I guess if you go the opposite way, there's like a random NPC guy, the Wolverine guy.
Oh, the Beast Claw guy.
But I ended up at the Black Jail Knight, and my poor wife sitting next to me while I'm trying to fight this guy. I hadn't found any Shadow Tree blessings, anything. I was level 150. I was like actually almost getting one shot. There were a couple attacks where he did actually one shot me, and it was embarrassing. And I felt really just like terrible at the game. And I was talking to my buddy about it. He's like, oh, have you found any of the Shadow Tree fragments? And I was like, no, this is pretty much the first place that I've been to. Like, I haven't been anywhere else. He's like, you need to go find some. He's like, go find a couple. He's like, I got like 3 levels and then I went and fought that guy and it was easy. And I'm like, okay. So it's interesting that they dropped this entire new mechanic. There's like this entire new way of leveling. And of course, in typical FromSoft manner, they don't tell you that it exists, really, or at least that I could find.
I think there's you know what it might be? So, because I know this happened to me, they give you like a little tutorial prompt that tells you about it, but you probably have tutorial prompts turned off.
Yeah, I certainly do. Because I've done like 4 new games. So it's like, I don't need oh man.
The same thing happened to me. Cause I was thinking about it and I was like, dang, like, why am I not? I was like, I feel like the DLC. Oh, it's because in the menu, like you can still go back and access those tutorial things like in your inventory. And I was like, I don't remember getting a pop-up about this. And then I was like, oh, I should probably turn that on.
Man, that would have probably changed everything because, okay, so that changes my initial opinion about this then, because I was going to say it is like unguided to almost a bad level because I just felt like I was like woefully unprepared for everything that this DLC was about to throw at me.
Which, I mean, yeah, I think the game has some system to be like, please level your stuff up. But listen, and I don't think I wouldn't feel bad about this because that was, I think, a complaint from a lot of people was like, I'm not doing any damage. I don't know what's happening. I'm level like 300. And yeah, you like really need to get these blessings to progress. And I think a lot of people were in that exact same position. Oh, I don't have tutorials turned on. I don't know that leveling this stuff's important.
I feel like it's one of those things that like it should just like for the DLC, they should just automatically re-enable tutorial pop-ups. I know that's gonna like frustrate people regardless. Like no matter what, someone's gonna find a way to complain about it. But at least like then you have new tutorial notes, which, you know, is probably super helpful.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
But that was kind of my experience with just like the general DLC was like I think I died more times in this DLC than I did in the entirety of the main game. Like bosses were, I don't know if it was just because I was shaking the rust off. I hadn't played in a bit, but it felt like it was absurdly punishing. Like even just like random enemies, you don't kill them fast enough. And like the little shadow guys that are just everywhere, the guys who, you know, are supposed to die in one hit, like they can just ruin your life if you let them. Like if you're not paying attention, they really suck.
Yeah, that was how I felt about a lot of the DLC. I pretty much, until I got like on the higher blessing levels, I mean, I really felt like everything's just dishing out ridiculous damage. Everything is like, everything takes a ridiculous amount of hits. Now, that being said, I was pretty much playing Elden Ring on easy mode. I was like full 80 build with like Moonlight Greatsword.
Nice.
And I, you know, summon Mimic Tear for every fight that I can. So, but I'm not nerfing myself any more than the game already. The game's complicated enough, people. Listen.
Yeah. Well, and so my build was I was trying out. So I had never used sorceries or incantations or anything in a Dark Souls game, in any of them. None of them.
That's crazy.
Because when I play these games, I like swords and shields. Like that's what I like, or I'll find a halberd that I really like. And that's like my play style. That's what I always do. I ignore any spells. So I decided I did a New Game Plus run after my first run. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to scale just into int and I'm just going to use Azur's Comet and just push through all the bosses. Turns out that's really boring and it's not a good way to learn how to do spells.
Yeah.
So I needed another playthrough. So I started as like a pyromancer and I started using pyromancies and then I eventually ended up with like dragon incantations. So I was like a faith strength build kind of, mostly faith. And that's what I ran into the DLC with. And I actually found running into faith was really good because a lot of things are really weak to holy damage because I was using the coated sword, which is just no physical damage, just entirely holy damage. That thing shreds in the DLC. Absolutely shreds. Even though I felt like I was doing well in the main game, because I played for a few hours in the main game, beat a couple bosses to make sure I was like kind of up to snuff. And it still didn't feel like it was enough for the DLC.
I mean, listen, it's hard. And I mean, even though I was playing Elden Ring on easy mode, like there were still plenty of fights that I was like, I don't really know what to do here. I didn't really struggle on anything too bad. Final boss accepted. By the way, full DLC spoilers.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying, I'm like, man, we should probably like actually give a spoiler warning. So I was just thinking, man, I'm just gonna ADR a spoiler warning in. Okay. But yeah, sure. I mean, you know, I can.
Listen,
why not
if you
have
clicked
both?
on this,
so if you clicked on
spoilers,
Shadows
right?
of the then this is fully spoilers. We're going to be talking about everything. We're going to be talking about a lot of bosses and the end game. And yeah, the bosses. So other than the final boss being Radon, which I want to talk about that later because I feel like it's I don't know, for story reasons, I feel annoyed about it. And I have to voice it. But we'll get into that. We're going to talk about the lore a little bit. What other bosses did you have trouble with? Because for me, it was like Meter, Mother of Hands was like a great boss fight, but I struggled with that one. I struggled with that one a lot.
I think so. The true problem with Elden Ring, as it boils down to, is Mimic Tear is just so good, and like spirits are good in general. There is literally not much in this game that is able to survive you just like spamming Comet at them while they're like distracted by a spirit summon.
True.
So there's like a surprising amount of bosses that I just didn't have trouble with. I'll give a special shout out to all of the bosses that literally don't give you enough time to summon your spirits when the fight starts.
Cough, cough, Mesmer. Oh my
Cough,
God.
cough, Mesmer. But so the only bosses I had trouble with is where I can't summon because I'm bad. And I have to like fight them one-on-one. And Commander Gaius.
Man, so there were 2 bosses that I had to just like stop and go to another area and just like come back to because I was getting like way too frustrated. Radon was one of them because I realized I was at like Erdtree level like 15 out of 20.
Yeah.
And it turns, I was at 13 out of 20 because apparently I hadn't explored the DLC enough. I thought I had done pretty well because I was like, oh, I'm at 13. There's probably only 15 levels. I'm probably not too far off. No, there's 20 levels. And so I went in there, got absolutely melted, and I thought that was the difficulty, and I thought that was the reason that I was having trouble with it. Turns out it's just a bullshit boss, and it's just, it's poorly designed. But Commander Gaius was the other one that I had to just, like, leave the area and come back because I just had I had no idea how to fight him. I felt like no matter what I was doing, I was, like, getting hit with, like, the ram move just over and over again and just basically getting one shot by it. I had no time to do anything. Like, even when I summoned my Mimic, it was just, it sucked. Like, that fight was really hard.
Yeah, so I got to the DLC really early. Cause, you know, I'm off work right now. So I pretty much started playing the DLC at midnight and I logged like an absurd amount of time in that first weekend. So I think it was like 10 p.m. on Saturday when I got to the Gaius fight. And I remember getting there and sending my friends a text message and being like, pretty sure I got to the first fight that's gonna get a nerf. Just because like the hitbox was so ridiculous.
So bad.
I know some people like got him stuck in a corner and cheesed him. I forget how I beat that fight.
I remember I ended up just like getting lucky. He focused way too hard on my Mimic and like I was able just to lightning bolt him down or lightning spear, whatever the throwy lightning spell is. My bread and butter of my build. I got lucky and that's like the only way that I beat him, if I'm being entirely honest. And I will fully admit, like, I feel like it's worth saying, I'm talking about how hard the DLC is. I'm not very good at these games. Like, I get through them and I love them to death, but it's like, if you take away my summons, if you take away all that stuff, I'm not very good. I just kind of mash buttons and I learn bosses where I can, but I'm usually pretty bad for panic rolling, and just like mashing attack when I shouldn't mash attack. So this is probably a contributor, but
okay, so to just establish ethos for myself anyway, I am gonna say that I'm pretty good.
Okay.
I 100% Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, and Bloodborne, and Demon Souls in preparation for Elden Ring coming out. So I was like, I really want to get these games in. I at least played through Sekiro. I'm not very good at it.
I'm still stuck on the last boss of Sekiro, and I have been since the game launched. So will I ever beat it? Probably not.
Probably not. So like I've played a lot of the Souls games. I've like done everything there is to do. And did I say Bloodborne?
Yep.
And then like I did like rune level 1 for Elden Ring, which was a lot of fun. I'm currently doing like a Dark Souls level 1. So some of that's just strategy. Some of that's like just learning the games and stuff. So I'll at least set up myself an ethos to be like, actually, I think I'm pretty good at these. But
yeah,
still, like,
if you can do a rune level 1 playthrough, you're probably pretty, at least competent. Like at the very least, like
it just takes a little bit of figuring out. But and I had trouble with the same 2 fights you had. Final boss is just bullshit. I think everybody at this point is like on the same page about that.
Yeah, I felt pretty vindicated going to like, because that was the only fight that I had to look up to be like, what is he weak to? What can I do? And like everyone's like, yeah, just switch to a cheese build. Like go back to Renala, respec, do another build and just cheese it because there's no reasonable way to learn this boss, because I think I died probably like 40 plus times before even looking it up, because I'm like, there has to be a way. And I would get close. Like I would get him down to like a quarter health, and then he enters like third phase, and I'm just like, yeah, there's nothing I can do here. Like what, like the insane amount of AoE coming off of him is just like alone way too much to deal with.
Yeah, I think I didn't even get that far. I think I got to like second phase a couple times on my default build, and I was like, this isn't gonna work. Now, I had the benefit of having done the level 1 run before and saying like, oh, I'm just going to use the same tactics for my level 1 run, but on like a higher level character. So I just used like Rot Breath, Blasphemous Blade Incantation, Black Flame Incantation, all of which are just % health damage. And then you in a Mimic tier just doing % health damage eventually is going to hit 100%. So
eventually. One day.
And still took a bunch of tries, which is crazy, but...
So I guess this segues into like another topic that I want to talk about, which is like the sheer amount of weapons and new content added to the game. So like at any point during the DLC, did you stick with your base game build the entire way through, or did you ever kind of like look at weapons and say, oh, I'm going to try this, or like change up your build at all? Because personally, I didn't change my build. I just found good faith weapons within the DLC. Like Midra's like boss weapon is insane. Like really good. Yeah, the spell is awesome. So like being a faith build, I feel like there was a lot for me to kind of use. Like there was a lot of really good weapons that I ended up picking up, and I was just amazed at the sheer amount of content that there was in the DLC. Like I was looking number wise, and there's like 300 something weapons in the base game, and they added in an additional 103 weapons to the DLC, which is a third of the like crazy. And that's not including armor. Like that's insane. Like it's unprecedented, honestly.
Yeah, so I was on int build, which was a little weird because I sort of felt the opposite. Like I was picking up a lot of faith stuff, and I was like, oh, this would be cool if I was a faith build. But I'm like, I'm an int build. And like there was a couple of the carrier areas that had some cool stuff. I managed to pick up like the big version of the like Carrion Greatsword.
Oh yeah.
Like Glintstone Greatsword or something. Which was a fun weapon to use. I just like the Greatsword moveset. But overall, I was a little disappointed in that fact. Eventually I found some like cool stuff. They have the Ghost Flame Cannon of Haima spell, which is like a pretty cool one. Like the like Black Hole spell is pretty sick.
Yeah. The one that I wish that I had an int build to be able to use, pretty sure it was int and not arcane, was Rolana's weapons, like the boss weapon.
Oh yeah.
Which is basically Pontiff Sullivan's swords on crack.
Those are cool, I'll tell you that. But yeah, so I didn't really switch up my build that much. I was a little disappointed because I was like, oh, that would have been cool. Sometimes I would pick up some weapons and I'd be like, oh, I could go just throw like a magic ash on this. So like oh my gosh, the DLC gives you so much upgrade material. So like
so much, like almost too much. Like it's like how many of these weapons do they think I'm actually going to upgrade? Because I think I ended up fully upgrading, I think 4 new weapons, and I still had like 3 ancient, like somber, like the final upgrade material, the ancient dragon smithing stone, and I had like 4 of each left over, and I had done like 4 weapons maxed out.
I'm just not complaining, but
me either. It felt like it was just like, how much of this do they want me to use? Like, there's too much.
So that was but let me see. What did I end up using? So I ended up upgrading some beast claws, although I never really used them. I upgraded the Troll Knight sword. I need to shout out the Smith script weapons because I wanted to bring
those up. Yeah, I was just thinking about them because those are ones that I wanted to try, and just like I didn't fit into my build or anything that I was trying to do at all.
Now, have you used the Smith script hammer?
No, I didn't use any of the Smith script weapons.
So this might be one of my new favorite weapons ever. So, because the gimmick with all the Smith's grip weapons is you like throw them, right?
Yeah.
So they have this big, like Warhammer sized weapon that you use.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, you know, what's he going to do? Is he just going to toss it? No, if you do the heavy attack, you swing it around like a hammer throw, and then your character just like spins in circles a couple times and then just chucks it.
That's incredible.
It's so much fun to use because when it hits enemies, like if it's a humanoid enemy, they just get like knocked over. So there's so many enemies in the DLC that you can just kind of like spin to win, throw your hammer, knock them over, and then just keep them in the stun lock.
Oh man,
it's
I want to
fun.
do like an Olympian build now, where I just use all the Smith's grip up, like just like start javelining people, start like throwing hammers at people. Like I feel like that's so good.
I think my only complaint about the like new weapon types is they're just not very like fleshed out. They're like, hey, we added martial arts, and you're like, wow, that's so cool. Yeah, there's 2 of them, and you're like,
yeah.
And they both come from the same guy.
Do they both come? What's his name? Dryleaf Dane.
Yeah, Dryleaf
Do they both
Dane.
come from him? Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, because I know the one comes from him for sure. Because you get like his like when he dies or whatever.
One of them is like the punching ones, and then I think the other one's like the kick ones.
Yeah,
but I was like, that's a little disappointing. I think light greatswords have like 2 or 3, and I think it's like the DLC weapon, the Rolana's weapon, and the Milady.
Milady, yeah, I was gonna say I almost used Milady. I like the idea of light greatswords. I just never ended up using them. I'm trying to think if I actually ended up using any of like the new weapon types, and I guess not, because I was gonna respec to use like Mesmer's spear, but I just never ended up doing it because it was a totally different build than what I was doing, and I just really wanted to stay with my dragon incantations because I like dragon spells. So like, why not?
Yeah, so I think that was my only complaint about the weapons. I loved a lot of the new weapons for what they were. It was cool having just new stuff to work with, definitely. And like giving them that more unique feel of like, hey, this is a throwing weapon, or hey, here's like a potion bottle weapon. It was
the
cool.
idea of having
different.
The throwing weapons is like something that I did not have on my bingo card for the DLC. I think it's incredible. I think it's like so new and so fresh because as far as I know, that hasn't been done in any of the games before, really. So
yeah, I mean, now you're gonna make me rack my brain to think about it, right?
Because I mean, I think the only other thing are like consumables where you just like, you know, throw knives or kukris or whatever, right? But like, I don't think there's anything else in any of the other games.
Dark Souls 3. So now I'm just going to look like a turbo nerd, right? Dark Souls 3 has the follower javelin, which you can throw.
Oh, okay.
From Ashes of Ariandel. But
it does.
That's the only one I can think of.
So I guess they kind of like took that concept and just kind of ran wild with it.
Yeah, I mean, much in the same way that like the Dark Souls 3 weapon arts ended up being the Elden Ring weapon arts.
That's, very true. So on things that you didn't like, let's shift to things that you did like. And I wanted to say, like, what's your tier list for like the bosses? What are like your top 3? What are your top 3 bosses from the DLC? I was going to say, so in the meantime, because mine are, and it's like not even hard for me, honestly. So number 3 comes in at Mesmer, because I just like, even though he was a terrible fight for me and I had a lot of trouble, I think he was really cool. And while I was kind of disappointed by his second phase, because I just kind of like dummied it, I thought it was great. And just like the entire lore behind all of that, I thought was really cool. Number 2, I think easy was Midra. Midra was such a cool boss. Like just thematically was just like, it just like visually, just everything about it was really cool. Again, another boss that I had a little bit of a tough time with, but really cool. And then my favorite boss from the DLC, I don't know why it's my favorite boss. I did not have trouble with them at all. I beat them first try, didn't even have to summon in my mimic, was Rolana. Rolana is my favorite boss of the DLC. And I think it's because like she kind of blends together like several of my favorite or like good bosses from other games. I don't know why I got like big Artorias vibes from her. Obviously Pontiff Sullivan vibes. It's just like, just such a cool character and like awesome moveset. I just thought she was like super neat, honestly. So yeah, my tier, like, you know, top 3 is Rolana, Midra, and Mesmer. I think easy.
So I don't know about the order for mine, but I sort of want to give 3 and then also include an honorable mention here. So I want to give an honorable mention to the big NPC fight before the final boss fight.
Yeah, that one was really good.
Because I just thought that was the coolest thing. Like, bringing all these characters that you had seen in like the different parts of the DLC together for like one big brawl at the end. Especially the fact that like when you summon the characters, they don't like come in immediately, but they sort of like come in like one by one.
They start trickling in. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they've got some like good dialogue that happens during it too. I just thought that was like the coolest thing.
Yeah, I agree.
And it was, you know, it was actually like a little bit of a tough fight too. Like I thought it was just going to be like, oh, we're just going to do this. It's going to be like a pushover. But I had to give it a couple times and like a couple tries and like use a little bit of strategy to like bait them out. So I really enjoyed that one. That's my honorable mention. I'll say for my fights, at 3, I'm going to put the Bale fight. I liked the Bale fight. I know you don't like it.
I'm biased against the Bale fight because so this is one of my big gripes about the DLC, and I'm sorry to take over this section a little bit.
No.
The NPC that you have to summon in, Egon is his name, I think. If you're going to have a quest attached to an NPC that you summon into the boss fight, have them say their line one time, and then when you summon them in every other time, they can shut up.
No.
Because the amount of times I heard "curse you, Bale," actually, I muted my TV. I was so mad.
No, see, you know what? If it wasn't Egon, I might agree with you. But Egon is like S+ tier character for me. I love that man.
The best voice acted character in like voice acted character in the FromSoft series, like games. I don't care. His voice acting was so good, but
you just
made me so mad.
Curse
you, man.
I was listening to some podcast the other week, and then they just made a joke about it. And I was like, yeah, these guys got it.
Yeah.
Egon just, I mean, it's a fun fight. I like the Bale fight. I mean, there's a little bit that's mechanically annoying about it, but I thought it was like overall a fun fight. I thought it's a cool sort of like lead up to it. Egon's a fun character. Like, it's got some cool lore on the backstory. Like, it's,
Agreed.
For me, it's like a pretty good all-arounder. It's classic, like, FromSoft DLC dragon fight.
They had to have a dragon fight.
There was going to be
like
something.
They had to, so.
That's probably my 3. Number 2, I'm gonna put in a vote for the Erdtree avatar.
Oh, God.
Because
okay.
I just thought it was... So I didn't have too much trouble with it, because I sort of got what the gimmick was. I'm honestly surprised it didn't have more phases.
Not. I did not understand the gimmick. It really frustrated me a lot.
Well, as soon as I killed it the first time and it came back, I was like, there's either two things that are happening here. One, I'm missing something and it's just going to keep coming back. Or 2, we just have to do it a couple times. It's going to get like a phase change between each of them, and then that's going to be that. So with it just being the second thing, I was like, okay, it's just funny. Once you sort of are like, oh, I'm not going to be here for the rest of my life, I was like, that's very funny that it just kind of dies and comes back.
I ran around the boss arena because by the third time it came back, I thought there was like something reviving it. So I was just running around the boss arena, just evading everything, trying to find the thing that was resummoning it.
Oh, no.
And then I just angrily went and fought it again. And it died.
See, I'm too stupid for that. So I'm glad you were like thinking about it. I was just like, oonga boonga.
I thought way too far out of the box.
Which, you know what, for FromSoft, you know, that's not a terrible idea. My number 1, God, there's another one I want to talk about. Okay. I think my number 1 fight goes to Midra.
Yeah.
Because it's just another fight with cool lore. I like the implications of the fight. The fight's fairly fun. Really short run back, which I appreciate.
Yep.
Because sometimes I like the Blessings America with the revives, but it's annoying when it's like, oh, I want to change up something with my build, especially if you're doing like a spell build where you have to
swap out spells.
Just swap it out, where you have to like run back through the whole dungeon. So I like the fact that it's a short run back from a grace, and it's a fight that I sort of felt like was one of the more fair fights in the DLC, where like everybody else is doing like crazy stuff. The Midra fight felt like it was accomplishable going into it versus some of the other fights where you're like, I don't even know what I'm doing, and you have to sort of figure it out. I was like, oh, this is like a classic FromSoft battle.
I think it was made even better by the fact that when you go into the boss arena, you have to kill this pathetic little shriveling old man every time, which like I died several times to Midra, like probably a couple dozen, honestly. And like the fact that I could go in and just like beat up this little old man every time I went into the boss arena made me feel so much better about dying. It was just like this little bit of relief where I'm just like, yeah, just fuck you, guy. I'm just gonna beat you with a stick. And that made me feel a lot better about how hard I thought the boss was. But
okay.
It
that
was
guy hit surprisingly hard.
Yeah, I realized that one time, and then I'm like, yeah, I'm not letting that happen again. Like, sit back down, man.
I died at least a few times to him.
Oh, interesting. It's interesting that you say it's one of the more balanced fights. I think it's one of the more like accomplishable fights without like cheese or like learning the strategy too much, because it is very straightforward. Like he only has like a couple different attacks that are just flavored a little differently. His second phase is a little bit much. Sure. There's a lot going on, but yeah, you're right. Like it is fairly accomplishable, and it's just like it's an amazing fight. The music, like thematically, definitely why he's on my list.
The attack where he like jumps up and then just like head dive bombs the ground is also very funny. Yeah, which gives points as far as I'm concerned.
If you can make me laugh mid fight, then it's probably a good fight.
You're like, that's hilarious. I do want to make a mention of one more. I know you said 3 and now I'm on 5.
Oh no,
but,
please,
like whatever.
Please, it's good.
I want to make a point for the Mother Fingers fight for probably being I mean this in the best way possible, the worst designed boss I've ever seen. I mean that visually, because oh my god, it's an ugly amalgamation of fingers.
I thought the one reborn from Bloodborne was bad enough. No, this like took it to another level.
Like a mangled mass of fingers. I was looking at it and I was like, that is the worst thing anybody has ever put in a video game.
And then like on top of that, it like opens up its nasty chest and just spits out fingers everywhere. Just disgusting.
This is terrible.
So what really threw me off about that fight was like at some point I noticed like in the middle of its head, I thought it was just a finger. It has an eye in the middle of that.
In the middle of the
head.
fingerprint, right?
And that like, as soon as I noticed that, I was tilted. And I'm just like, no, I like died immediately as soon as I noticed that. Cause I'm just like, I can't pay attention to this fight anymore. I'm like, what is happening with the eye? What's going on?
Yeah, like I already thought the finger spiders were going to be like the worst thing I was going to see in the game. When I was playing through the DLC, my girlfriend came over one time, and I was like, "You want to see the worst thing in this game?" And she's like, "Do you
want to be traumatized?"
Sure. And then, because one of the finger ruins, there's this like parade of fingers that comes out.
Yeah.
Like right next to the one grace, there's like a big one, and then behind it's like 20 little ones, and then there's a big one. So I like walked right, and my girlfriend hates spiders. So I walked right to the ledge and I was like, check that out. And she was like, what are those?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, man.
Terrible design, 10 out of 10. Would love FromSoft to design something as bad as that again.
Yeah, just make like a Bloodborne sequel that's just full body horror for all of the bosses.
No.
Like, just
why would you manifest that?
Listen, it's gonna happen eventually. Miyazaki's got a break at some point. Like, he's gonna have like a mental breakdown or a midlife crisis, and that's what it's gonna be.
I think the only thing worse could just be like a giant foot with like eyes on its soul or something.
Oh. Yeah, just a good fetish fight. Yeah.
Why do you gotta put it like that?
So, and we're gonna like quickly swerve away from that because I hate it. So,
And with that absolutely disgusting thought, that is going to bring us to the end of the first episode. So please remember to give us a rating wherever you're listening. If you're listening on YouTube, please hit subscribe. Please go check out Overthinking Games wherever you can find your podcasts. I will have a link to them in the show notes. Editing this one was honestly an absolute pleasure. Again, I think this was a fantastic conversation, and this was a really good insight as to how we both play the game and how we play a little differently, our thoughts on the game. We align on a lot of things, but there's a lot of things that are very different, and I thought this conversation was amazing. So huge thank you to Seth for coming out for this one. There will be another one that will start on the lore of everything. We're literally just going to talk about lore for like an hour. That's also an amazing conversation. So if you have any questions or topics, please send them over to lordtodeath@gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram at lordtodeath. There's also a Q&A function on the Spotify episode where you can drop a comment. I can't respond to it, but I promise that I will see it, and I do take all recommendations, all comments very seriously. I want to put out what you want to listen to, so if you want to listen to anything in particular, please, all you have to do is let me know. I'll do it. And if you want to be a guest on the podcast, like our good friend Seth here, or like DJ before, again, all you have to do is send me an email at lordtodeath@gmail.com or reach out to me on social media. I'm always happy to collaborate with people. I think it's a really good time because occasionally just talking into the void by myself gets a little boring, but please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Please remember to rate the show. Merch drop coming soon. All the information will be on my Instagram, so please check that out. I'm really excited to get it to you guys, and I will lure you guys to death in the next one. See ya.